Hello everyone, it's Paul Tilley and this is LW1230. Today I'm looking at tort again, and particularly professional liability. We'll have a short discussion on that. Stay tuned. Without any further ado, then let's take a look at this last section which deals with the professional liability thing. We touched on it last class, just wanted to bring it up here. We're talking about professional liability in the context of the duty of care. So we've done a lot of work with regards to this concept of duty of care and the standard of care. Everybody generally owes everybody a duty of care. That is, I have to do my very best and you have to do your very best not to hurt someone, either accidentally or purposely. Okay? So that means that in order to do that, you have to be thinking ahead. And you have to ask yourself, am I doing something that could potentially hurt someone? What measures should I put in place in order to make sure that I don't hurt anyone? So you're driving your car down the street all the time in your back of your head, you're saying to yourself, am I driving the right speed? Am I on the road? Am I following the rules? Am I driving safely? Is the car working great? Do the brakes work? Is there anybody walking on the sidewalk? Our brain is constantly doing that. That's what we call our duty of care. If we were going down the street blindfolded at 100 miles an hour, we are not applying a duty of care. Okay? So most of us have a general idea of this concept of duty of care. The next step up from that is something called the standard of care. The standard of care would vary depending on what you do and who you are. Okay? A standard of care is what the minimum standard that would be reasonably expected by a reasonable person in a reasonable situation. So you have to do your best to ensure that you do things to the very best of your ability in order to maintain this standard. And we have seen examples of where people have not necessarily applied that standard properly. This is particularly true if you're a professional or someone who hangs up a sign that basically says, trust me, I'm a professional X. I'm a doctor. That means I'll look after you to make sure that I will, make you feel better as opposed to worse. A lawyer who assures that they will, you're paying them good money in order to follow the law and do things legally and make sure that you're protected as their client. Any number of things, including engineers. Engineers is another professional. So, if you have an engineer, that engineer is supposed to do things to a certain standard, okay? And the standard would normally be laid out in terms of professional codes of conduct. What is it that is the standard level of care that an engineer should be expected to do? And such was the case in Elliott Lake. In Elliott Lake, this man, Robert Wood, was an engineer who looked at buildings and assessed the quality of buildings. And he was hired by a mall up in Elliott Lake called the Elliott Lake Mall, or the Elgin Mall, and they wanted him to check the integrity of the mall to make sure it was fine. Now, I'll just give you a little video rundown on what
Opened in 1980, the Aldo Center was once described as Elliott Lake's crowning achievement. Shaped like a capital L, the two-floor shopping mall included a rare design feature, a giant rooftop parking lot. Tragically, the parking deck was built without a waterproofing membrane, and it leaked relentlessly for
The man who was hired to inspect the mall, Mr. Wood, was hired to do an inspection to ensure, supposedly to ensure, the quality of the wall of the structure. And was it all right? Because there was concerns all along that, yeah, this place is leaking and it could be some damage. He went in and he did a little bit of an assessment, and effectively he said, yeah, you're good to go. There's no problem. So what had happened is they relied on his advice, and to their detriment, the mall fell down and 2 people were killed. So Mr. Wood was brought to justice in 2 respects. First of all, the Engineering Society in Ontario reviewed what he had done or what he hadn't done, and they took away his professional engineering stamp. So he was discredited by the Engineering Association. He was also brought to court with regards to the issue of the inspection and did he live up to the standard of care. And effectively, his work provided unfounded assurances that gave the mall owner a documented excuse to continue doing nothing. His review was similar to that of a mechanic inspecting a car with a cracked engine block who pronounces the vehicle sound because it had a good paint job. What had happened is that he was in fact found guilty of effectively not ensuring enough due care in terms of inspecting the mall. And that is a cautionary tale, I would say, to professionals to ensure that they make sure they live up to that standard of care. I also mentioned there last week, this very briefly, this idea of trespass of chattel. And companies would have chattels. Chattels are just a fancy word for items that a company owns that really can be moved. You could think of McDonald's and their golden arches. Okay, that's an example of a chattel that McDonald's owned. Now, the golden arches, you know them physically, but from a goodwill value, they represent everything there is about McDonald's as their own. That would be considered a trespass in chattels, and that would be considered no different than a trespass on property, and there could be legal action taken for that.